There's a strange heaviness that settles into your chest some mornings, a quiet fatigue that has nothing to do with how much you slept or what you ate the day before, nothing to do with physical exhaustion or the usual complaints about being tired. You wake up, and the light coming through your window looks the same as it always has, but something fundamental has shifted in how you receive all of this, in how it lands inside you. The things that used to excite you, the plans you used to make with genuine enthusiasm, the conversations you used to lose yourself in for hours without noticing time passing, they all feel like performances now, like lines you're reading from a script you didn't write and no longer believe in, words that come out of your mouth automatically while some other part of you watches from far away. DT. Ached and unmoved. You still go through the motions because that's what functioning adults do, because the world keeps turning and bills need paying and people expect you to show up. But somewhere deep inside, in a place you're almost afraid to look at directly, there's a voice asking a question you don't want to answer. What if none of this matters the way I thought it did? What if the entire framework I've been using to organize my life and assign value to experiences is built on assumptions that aren't actually true? It's not depression, not exactly, because you're not collapsing or crying or unable to get out of bed. You're not paralyzed or desperate or reaching for immediate relief from unbearable pain. It's more like watching yourself from a slight distance, like you're the audience and the actor at the same time, simultaneously performing the role of your life and observing that performance with increasing skepticism. And you can see all the strings now, all the mechanics of how the performance works, the cues and the responses, the predictable patterns that everyone around you still seems to find meaningful and important. This seeing exhausts you in a way that sleep can never fix, a tiredness that lives in your bones and your attention, that makes every social interaction feel like running a marathon while wearing a mask that's slowly suffocating you. You start to notice how much of your day is spent pretending to care about things you've stopped caring about, manufacturing enthusiasm for projects that feel meaningless, producing excitement about plans that leave you feeling nothing but a vague sense of obligation. You count how many smiles you generate that don't reach your eyes, how many times you nod and say the right words, while your actual thoughts are somewhere else entirely, how many conversations you navigate on autopilot while your mind drifts to some gray, quiet place where nothing is demanded of you, where you don't have to perform interest or concern or passion, or any of the emotions that seem to come so naturally to everyone else around you. And the terrifying part isn't that you feel sad about this, isn't that you're mourning the loss of your old enthusiasms or grieving for the person you used to be. The terrifying part is that you don't feel much of anything at all, just this flat, neutral observation of everything happening around you and through you, like you're a camera recording footage, but not actually experiencing the events it captures. You begin to wonder if something is broken inside you, if you've somehow lost access to the part of yourself that connects with life, with other people, with meaning itself, if there's been some kind of internal rupture that severed the wires between your mind and your emotions. You watch others laugh at jokes that feel hollow to you, watch them find genuine amusement in situations that register to you as predictable social rituals, nothing more, and you wonder if they're accessing something real that you've lost, or if they're just better at maintaining the illusion. You see people get excited about promotions at jobs that seem meaningless to you, about vacations to places that will be the same essential experience as every other vacation, about new purchases that will provide a brief dopamine hit before joining the pile of other purchases that promised fulfillment and delivered only temporary distraction. You watch them argue passionately about politics or sports or celebrities, investing enormous emotional energy in outcomes that won't actually change the fundamental nature of their lives, and you feel like an alien observing a species you used to belong to but can no longer understand. There's a coldness creeping into your interactions, not cruelty exactly, not intentional distance or calculated withdrawal, but a kind of detached politeness that keeps everyone at arm's length without them quite being able to identify what's changed. You tell yourself you should feel guilty about this, that you should try harder to engage, to be present, to be warm, to be the person you used to be or the person others expect you to be based on who you were before this change happened. But the energy required for that performance feels impossibly vast, like you're being asked to run on a fuel you no longer have access to, and you're not even sure why you should make the effort anymore. Maybe you're depressed and in denial about it. You think, Maybe this is what clinical depression looks like and you've been rationalizing it as something else. Maybe you've become cynical or bitter without realizing it. Maybe the world hasn't changed, but you have, and not in a good way. Maybe you're just exhausted from years of forcing yourself to care about things that never really mattered, playing games you never wanted to play, and now the bill has come due. You start cataloging your symptoms like evidence in a case against yourself. The inability to get excited about future plans, the way invitations fill you with dread rather than anticipation, the preference for being alone, the way compliments slide off you without penetrating, the sense that you're watching your own life through soundproof glass. Friends ask if you're okay and you say you're fine, because explaining this formless exhaustion feels impossible, because you don't have the vocabulary to describe what's happening to you. So you smile and nod and make the appropriate sounds, performing normalcy with increasing effort, and feel yourself drifting further away from everyone, including the person you thought you were. What if this isn't a breakdown at all, but a breakthrough that just doesn't feel the way you expected it to feel, doesn't arrive with the fanfare and clarity that breakthroughs are supposed to bring? What if the exhaustion you're experiencing isn't the result of losing something essential, but the natural consequence of seeing something clearly for the first time, of your consciousness finally achieving enough resolution to perceive patterns and structures that were always there but that your previous way of seeing kept hidden? Richard Feynman once described the moment he realized that the things he'd been taught to revere, the ceremonies and rituals and social performances that everyone took seriously, the authority structures and credentialing systems, were just arbitrary constructions that didn't hold up under genuine scrutiny, that fell apart the moment you asked simple, honest questions about why things are the way they are. He didn't become bitter about this discovery, didn't sink into despair or reject all human institutions. He simply saw reality more accurately than he had before, developed the ability to distinguish between what's actually true or necessary and what's just convention or tradition, and that clarity changed how he related to everything around him. The heaviness you feel might not be pathology, might not be a symptom of something gone wrong in your brain chemistry or your emotional processing. It might be lucidity settling in, the weight of suddenly seeing the mechanics behind things that used to enchant you through their mystery. When you start to perceive the patterns behind social interactions, when you can predict how most conversations will unfold before they happen, when you see the repetitive nature of most human dramas, the shallow foundations of most cultural values, the arbitrary nature of most status hierarchies, you're not becoming sick or broken. You are becoming aware, developing a capacity to see things as they actually are rather than as you were trained to see them, as you were conditioned to interpret them by the culture you grew up in. And awareness, especially when it arrives suddenly after years of comfortable unconsciousness, feels absolutely nothing like the inspirational posters promised it would feel. You thought that seeing clearly would feel good, that truth would be exhilarating, that breaking free from illusions would be accompanied by a rush of freedom. But it turns out that illusions are comfortable, that the frameworks that organize our sense of meaning are like scaffolding holding up a building, and when you remove the scaffolding, you discover that the building doesn't have enough structural integrity to stand on its own, and you're left in the rubble wondering what you're supposed to do now. Think of it like this. Imagine you've spent your entire life watching a stage play, completely absorbed in the story unfolding before you, emotionally invested in the characters and their struggles, laughing and crying at all the right moments, gripping your seat during the tense scenes, your nervous system responding to the drama as if it were real. You never thought to question whether it was real because everyone around you was responding the same way, confirming through their reactions that yes, this matters, yes, we should care about this deeply. Then one day, quite by accident, you notice a gap in the curtain and you see backstage for just a moment. You see the actors changing costumes between scenes, laughing about lunch plans, discussing their actual lives that have nothing to do with the roles they're playing, reading their scripts and rehearsing lines. You see the stagehands moving props with practiced efficiency, the director checking his watch, the whole apparatus of production that makes the performance possible but has no authentic connection to the drama that everyone in the audience is experiencing as meaningful. And suddenly, in that moment of seeing behind the curtain, something irreversible happens. When you return to your seat and try to watch the play again, it's different now. The drama that moved you before still plays out on stage, the actors still deliver their lines with passion, but you know now that it's just people doing a job, following directions, performing emotions they don't actually feel. The magic is gone not because the actors got worse or the story changed, but because you now see the construction of it all. This is what's happening to you, except the play is everyday life, and there's no backstage area to return from, no way to step out of the theater and leave this knowledge behind. You're sitting in your seat watching people perform their roles with complete conviction. The ambitious professional, the devoted friend, the passionate activist, the spiritual seeker, the loving parent, the adventurous traveler. And you can see that these are roles, costumes people put on, scripts they've internalized from family and culture. It's not that these people are fake or that their emotions aren't real in the moment. It's that you've developed the ability to see the difference between what they genuinely feel and what they've been conditioned to perform. And once you see that gap, you can't stop seeing it in everyone, including yourself, watching your own performances with the same detached observation. This seeing creates a strange distance, a coolness that others might interpret as depression or aloofness, but is actually just clarity, refusing to participate in the performance it now recognizes, consciousness declining to pretend it doesn't see what it sees. The reason you feel empty isn't because you've lost something vital. It's because you're in the space between two different ways of being alive, suspended in the interval between one operating system shutting down and another one not yet coming online. You've stepped out of the first way, the unconscious participation in cultural scripts and social performances, the automatic acceptance of received wisdom. That old way doesn't work anymore. Your consciousness has evolved past the point where it can take those things seriously, and you can't go back no matter how much easier that might make things. But you haven't yet discovered what the second way looks like. Haven't found the new framework or the new source of meaning that might emerge from this clearing away of the old structures. You're in between, in the gap, in the void, and there's no rushing this process. So there's just silence where there used to be noise, emptiness where there used to be fullness, a kind of neutral observation that watches everything without being moved by much. You're not running on the old operating system anymore, the one that generated automatic excitement for conventional achievements and predictable pleasures. But you haven't installed a new one yet. People will worry about you during this phase, will notice the change in your energy and your engagement, even if they can't articulate exactly what's different. They'll try to pull you back into the play, to remind you of all the reasons you should care about the things you used to care about. They mean well, they're trying to help, but what they're actually asking you to do is unsee what you've seen, to forget what you now know, to pretend you still believe in the same illusions that organize their lives. And you can't do that, not authentically, no matter how much it might smooth your relationships or reduce your sense of isolation. The loneliness of this phase is profound, not the simple loneliness of being isolated from people, but a loneliness that comes from being isolated from the shared trance that makes most human connection possible. You're awake in a room full of dreamers, and while they sleep peacefully, lost in vivid dreams they believe are reality, you sit there in the dark, eyes open, unable to join them, and unable to wake them without seeming cruel or crazy. So you stay quiet, and the silence grows heavier, and you wonder if maybe the dream was better even if it wasn't true, because at least when you were dreaming you felt like you belonged somewhere. But here's what no one tells you about this phase. It doesn't make you special, and it doesn't make you superior. And the moment you start to think it does, you've fallen into a different trap that's actually more dangerous than the original trance. There's a particular kind of arrogance that comes with waking up, a temptation to look down on everyone still dreaming, to feel smug about your clarity, to mistake awareness for wisdom or detachment for enlightenment. You can become exactly the kind of person you used to find insufferable, the one who condescends to others from their little mountain of superior understanding, who mistakes coldness for depth and dismissiveness for discernment. Richard Feynman understood this trap intimately, recognized it in himself and in others. He saw through pretension and ceremony, yes, but he never let that seeing harden into contempt. He remained curious about people even after he stopped being impressed by their credentials. He remained playful even after he stopped taking their games seriously. He found a way to see clearly without becoming cruel, to remain lucid without becoming bitter. And that's the narrow path you have to walk now if you want to make it through this phase without losing your humanity. Because it's very easy, when you're tired of performing and skeptical of everyone else's performances, to retreat into a kind of intellectual superiority that protects you from genuine connection but leaves you completely alone. It's easy to use your awareness as a weapon to cut down anything that threatens to move you, to maintain your cool detachment as a defense against the messiness of real engagement. And if you do that, if you let the clarity become cruelty, you'll find yourself in a different kind of prison, one where you're safe from disappointment, but also safe from love, safe from being fooled, but also safe from being surprised, safe from illusion, but also safe from wonder, and you'll sit in that safe place congratulating yourself on your clarity while life passes by outside your walls. What comes next isn't a return to innocence or enthusiasm or the easy pleasures that used to satisfy you. You don't get to go back to the dream once you've woken up, and you shouldn't want to, even though the waking world feels harder and colder than the dream ever did. What comes next is something quieter, more stable, less dramatic than anything you experienced in your previous way of being. It's a different kind of joy, one that doesn't announce itself with fireworks or flood your system with dopamine, that doesn't depend on external validation or special circumstances, but instead sits there in the background like low light, steady and real, not bright enough to illuminate everything but present enough to remind you that you're still alive, still capable of receiving experience, dear. Actually, you start to notice small things that don't require you to believe in grand narratives or noble purposes. The way morning light hits a particular wall in your room and creates patterns that shift slowly, the taste of cold water when you're genuinely thirsty, the unexpected kindness of a stranger who expects nothing in return, the relief of being alone in a room where no performance is required, where you can let your face relax, where you don't have to manage how you're being perceived. These aren't the highs that used to drive you, the achievements and validations and intense experiences you once organized your life around, the milestones you collected as evidence of a life well lived. They're something else entirely, something you probably wouldn't have noticed when you were still chasing bigger sensations. They're something that only becomes visible in the quiet space you're living in now, in the absence of all the noise and stimulation and drama that used to fill your days. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, without any single moment of realization, you begin to understand that this quieter way of being alive might actually be more honest than anything you experienced before, more aligned with what's actually true about existence. You start to see that the flatness you've been afraid of might just be the ground of reality, solid and real, something you can actually build on, rather than the unstable surface of illusions that required constant maintenance to sustain. You're not broken for being here. You're not missing out by not feeling what you used to feel. You're just seeing things as they are, without the distortions and enhancements that made reality seem more dramatic or meaningful than it actually is, and you're learning to find something worth preserving in that bare reality, something that doesn't depend on stories or beliefs or the approval of others, something that exists in the simple fact of being conscious in a universe that didn't have to produce consciousness at all. That's not nothing. That might actually be everything, just in a form you weren't trained to recognize or value. And maybe the exhaustion you feel isn't a sign that you're giving up on the world, but a sign that you're finally stopping the exhausting work of pretending the world is something other than what it is, finally ceasing the constant effort of maintaining illusions and performing enthusiasm. And in that stopping, in that rest, in that refusal to perform, you might discover what it actually feels like to be alive, without the weight of all those stories you've been carrying, all those roles you've been playing, all those meanings you've been forcing onto experiences that were complete without them. This isn't the end of your life. It's just the end of a particular way of organizing your relationship to life, a way that stopped working, a way that needed to stop working so that something more durable could have room to grow in the space it left behind, something quieter and more honest, something that doesn't promise you'll be happy in the ways you expected, but offers you the possibility of being real in ways you haven't tried. Idiot.